Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day. We're going to be jumping into another Kaiserreich lore video here. This one from JD Media again. We watched his video on the Second American Civil War and found it very interesting, you know, with Huey Long and John Reed and a lot of other characters, and just was very fascinated in everything that happened leading up to the start of the Second American Civil War. And he's got a bunch of other videos in the Kaiserreich universe here, most of which we've kind of already seemed to have gone over with Kaiser Cat's stuff. But there's a couple videos here that I don't know if it gets into even more of kind of like an alternate thing in the Kaiserreich universe, or if it's just a little bit more in-depth stuff that Kaiser Cat might not have got in here. But we're going to check out this video on the rise of Oswald Mosley. It's a documentary. It says in the description, following the departure of the royalist government, a red dawn descends upon Britain. The victorious revolutionaries set out to create a new nation built on syndicalism. So I'm assuming this is who becomes the leader of the syndicalist faction that takes over Britain, and that kind of becomes, that leads them into, what is it, like totalism, which is even kind of a more radicalist version of syndicalism, I guess. So interested to check this out. So links will be down below in the description, as always, to the original video, without my commentary and reaction, and to JD Media's channel. If you've been enjoying, you know, this Kaiserreich lore go through stuff, you know, make sure to go over there and give him a like, and you know, hit sub on his channel if you enjoy his content. So yeah, with all that said, we're just gonna jump into the video here. So again, this is the rise of Oswald Mosley Kaiserreich documentary. If the monitor will show up for me here. There it is. Let's go. A Red Dawn, which, by the way, classic movie. All right. You know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. This Red Dawn, the original with Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen, one of my all-time favorite movies. Wolverines, great. Would highly recommend it. It's definitely a cheesy, kind of campy 80s movie, but it's a good movie. Would recommend. Anyway, continue.
In 1925, Great Britain fell under the red flag. The British Revolution that had begun in earnest had swept across the nation and was now utterly victorious. In the final days of the Civil War, as the path to London lay open, the royalist government hastily fled the capital. With their departure, they left behind many classified and non-classified government documents.
To be
A loyalist army remained behind to defend the city and aid civilians. As the Republican army descended upon the capital, frantic urban battles erupted in the city streets. By Boxing Day 1925, the rebels had captured the city. The red flag was hoisted above Buckingham Palace, marking the triumph of the syndicalists.
I don't remember if in any of the videos we've gone through previously have they talked about exactly what the timeline was, but from what I understand, it was like less than a year, I think, that the syndicalists basically kicked out the royal family from Britain, right? It was pretty quick.
What remained of the British government fled to the Dominion of Canada, establishing a government in exile. Prime Minister Austen Chamberlain, leaving on one of the last ships, promised to return with Canadian reinforcements. Those unlucky enough not to board a ship were left behind.
Yep.
Many wealthy and aristocratic citizens were now trapped in the country. The Republican Army, by late 1925, secured the last of the southern ports, consolidating their control over Britain. In the ruins of London, the Provisional Revolutionary Government convened a constitutional convention. They would outline the Union of Britain's territorial integrity to be all of the island of Great Britain, the Channel Islands, the Isle of Man, and all other surrounding islands under the jurisdiction of the former United Kingdom.
So what, Ireland? So basically, yeah, they're saying all of this is under Syndicalist control, but Ireland right now, I guess, is not. Did Ireland become its own country? I think I remember Ireland, that was part of this whole issue, was like Ireland kind of revolted, even parts of Scotland did. And I think Ireland had gotten or claimed its independence again when this whole Syndicalist movement showed up. But it's surprising that it's not, I guess, being added into this as part of the Syndicalists. Maybe it is, and that's just not part of what he's talking about here.
The status of Northern Ireland was left intentionally ambiguous.
Here we go.
As 1926 opened, the rumours of a Red Army gathering in Liverpool for a potential invasion of Northern Ireland pushed the Ulster Unionists to agree to integration with the Republic of Ireland. The Emerald Isle was at last fully united and free from British rule.
So there we go, yeah, they became an independent nation.
The Republican Army now prepared itself for a possible Canadian invasion and monarchist resistance from within the country. The provisional government set out to start the reconstruction of Britain. Throughout the nation, volunteer groups got to work burying the dead, providing emergency medical care, and setting up food banks. Government buildings, stately homes, and other structures dubbed monuments to wealth were converted into homeless shelters. The government declared a nationwide public works project to rebuild the country. Despite the undertaking, resistance to the new regime persisted in the country.
I can see that too,
forces
yeah.
left behind still fought on as guerrillas. The Republican military and police units were stretched thin throughout the country and could not control the large swathes of countryside.
I could also see that being how, I guess, totalists or totalism, I don't know what the proper, verbiage for it is called, but that kind of more radical version of syndicalism could form based on resistance left over, right? Like the more people resisted, the more radical the syndicalists got and their methods got in order to purge any kind of resistance, that's usually kind of how things happen. So
the Loyalist League and the Operation Patrols would conduct counter-revolutionary war against the state. Operating out of disconnected rural areas, the resistance groups had become difficult to track and proved extremely dangerous to local militias. The so-called operational patrols proved effective terror units, inflicting much psychological damage on the populace. The lack of order in these regions led to the rise of civilians and ex-militiamen turning to banditry. Acts of violence and robbery terrified the nation. Even the counter-revolutionary loyalists would resort to banditry either out of survival or to carry on the fight.
Yeah, so basically parts of Britain kind of became the Wild West for a while, with really not a whole lot of law or any kind of enforcement, because the syndicalist movement at the time was spread too thin to be able to do anything about it.
Sparked the so-called banditry crisis. Things would escalate when a group calling itself the Loyalist Opposition kidnapped 3 government officials and executed 2 of them, with the 3rd one going missing. The group claimed more deaths would follow should orderly and moral governance not return to the country. It struck an immense fear into the fledgling republic. In response, local militia squads carried out brutal reprisals against suspected bandits.
Things keep escalating, like I said.
Under pressure to resolve the situation, the chairman of Britain, Arthur James Cook, tasked his vice chairman, John Wheatley, to end the crisis. This led to the establishment of the Special Operations Executive, a detachment of the Republican Army designated with detaining counter-revolutionaries and eradicating armed dissident groups. The SOE proved immensely successful in eliminating the bandits and crushing the loyalist holdouts. Having routed the armed militias, the SOE would turn its attention to all dissidents. The British Red Terror would begin. Any member of a prohibited organisation would be taken into custody.
Yeah.
Nobles were deemed counter-revolutionaries, and any members of the outlawed Conservative Party were arrested. Many would die or be savagely beaten while in custody. The detainees were imprisoned in internment camps and kept in poor conditions, leading to numerous deaths from disease, malnutrition, and general neglect. These actions appalled Union President George Lansbury. He declared that the People's Social Revolution had been stolen in a bloody coup. He announced his resignation for the presidency and made one last speech condemning the current state of the Union. "You have killed Britain's own sons. I hope that out of this terrible calamity there will arise a real spirit, a spirit that will compel people to give up reliance on force. If I had my way, I would close every recruiting station, disband the army and disband the air force. I would abolish the whole dreadful equipment of war and say to the world, do your worst." Chairman.
Interesting. It's kind of a, I don't know. In situations like that, it's like you're resigning, but you're resigning to make a statement that you don't want any kind of part in what's going on anymore. But at the same time, like, you're supposed to be the president of this new government. Wouldn't it be wise for you to stay and try to push more reforms to get away from what's going on, you know? Unless it's really just, it could very well be just a situation where literally everything was out of his control and he was only kind of like a president in name. He really didn't have any power or authority. So he resigned and made this speech as like one last cry for a wake-up call to everyone, you know, kind of a thing. But I don't know. It's always interesting in these situations when stuff like this happens in history where, you know, someone who should have power and authority to make changes resigns as a statement to help bring about change instead of staying in a position of power and trying to push forward more change. You know what I mean?
Chairman Cook would go on to win the Union presidency and then, through the Constitutional Convention, abolish the title, making his position as chairman the new head of state. Finally, as 1927 opened, the Constitution of the Union of Britain was formally brought into force. It established a secular state with universal suffrage to be governed by a federal Congress consisting of a provincial parliament and the Trade Union Congress representing the unions. The chairman of the Federal Congress would serve as its leader. The Union would also unveil its new flag. During the Revolution, various flags were used, such as a plain red flag for the provisional government, a defaced red duster for coastal militias, and a flag named the Old Republic Jack for the main inland army. The Union would decide upon a flag employing the old Republican colours of red, white and green.
I was gonna say, it looks very Irish. Isn't the Irish flag similar to that? I could be very wrong, but I think the Irish flag is like green, white, and like orange and vertical stripes. I could be thinking of a different country's flag though, so I apologize if I am.
Displayed horizontally, defaced with a new gear and torch, wholly unique to British syndicalism. At the first meeting of the Federal Congress, Chairman Cook opened by simply proclaiming, "Now's the day and now's the hour," the motto of the new syndicalist Britain. The first act of the government was to nationalise the whole economy and turn it over to the trade unions for workers' management. The country was facing a major food and oil shortage,
I bet,
and lacked the key resources needed for its industry, the majority of which were previously imported from the Dominions, who...
I mean, what, like... Yeah, Germany won the war, you know? I keep having like a hair on my tongue. Germany won the war, right? So that already has a big effect. They're taking over a lot of the French territories and colonies. Because of the revolution that happened here, the US stock market crashed. So the US is going through the Great Depression right now. So the states aren't able to really send any aid. Germany's not going to want to send any aid right now, especially because it's a syndicalist movement that's rising up. So they're not going to want to have anything to do with them. France's syndicalist movement is still, I think, trying to figure itself out at the moment. So really, this new little government is kind of on their own at the moment.
Who now openly refused to trade with Britain and imposed embargoes. To compensate for the deficits, Britain restructured its trade and concentrated on its syndicalist neighbours and neutral countries. As a result, a regime of rationing was brought in. Basic foodstuffs like dairy, sugar, fruit, margarine, meat and tea, clothing and petrol were placed under strict rationing. The extreme rationing of petrol prompted the government to investigate the possibilities of synthetic replacements. A Dig for the Revolution campaign commenced, encouraging people to grow food and take up farming, leading to migration to the countryside, and a series of people restaurants were set up where a full meal cost no more than 9 pence.
Damn.
These programs managed to improve the quality of life for most people, especially the poor. This helped foster a sense of revolutionary spirit amongst the poor.
I mean, yeah, when you have people who are able to start growing, and tending and caring for their own food, right? It gives them much more of a sense of independence and not having to rely on others, right? Having that kind of security of knowing where your next meal is always going to come from. You always have something there and available. It's a big burden off your shoulders, and especially, like you said, for poorer people.
Populace and acceptance of the new regime.
And it's also interesting too that they're looking for alternatives for, gasoline at the time. That could lead to all other kinds of, different pathways of technology being discovered in those, years after World War I that could, lead to them not having reliance on oil like a lot of the world has nowadays.
The SOE, still under Wheatley, was replaced by the Internal Security Service, ISS, and the Revolutionary Exportation Directory, RED. These two branches would be overseen by the new Central Intelligence Committee, CIC. Deputy Chairman Wheatley would continue as Intelligence Director, and together with Chairman Cook, they formed a powerful coalition securing their control and influence over the Union. That same year saw the return of the once prominent Oswald Mosley. During the Revolution, Mosley rose to prominence when he incited the Birmingham Uprising. This would make him a well-known figure in the later stages of the war. However, in the post-revolutionary period, Mosley had been snubbed by the leadership. Distrusted for his perceived ambition and aristocratic roots, Mosley departed for Europe in 1926. Long before the revolution, Oswald had served in the First Weltkrieg and was injured in a plane crash, leaving him with a permanent limp. He was the eldest son of a baronet and set to inherit the title. Following the Weltkrieg, Mosley had developed a passionate conviction to avoid any future war and became an MP for the Conservative Party. He soon distinguished himself as an orator and political player, one marked by extreme self-confidence. Eventually falling out with the Conservatives, he crossed the floor and would serve as an independent and then a Labour MP, becoming acquainted with the left. During his political wilderness in 1926, Oswald travelled Europe, building a small network of like-minded socialist individuals, visiting places like Paris and interacting with the growing Sorelian movement, or meeting Benito Mussolini in Italy and learning of his Mussolinism, which Mosley described as totalism, a total commitment to the revolution. Upon returning to Britain, Mosley reconnected with an old political ally, John Becket, and the pair would go on to establish the Popular Revolution Party. The following year in Scotland, a promised referendum on independence was underway. The campaign had turned violent, with Unionists and Nationalists fighting in the streets. Leading nationalist John McCormick formed the National Party of Scotland and appeared to be on the verge of winning. However, late into the campaign, McCormick proposed restoring the Windsor monarchy in an independent Scotland. This alerted the syndicalists, who ordered the suspension of the referendum indefinitely and arrested.
Yeah. Like I've said this in some previous Kaiserreich videos, like right now establishing any kind of monarchy seems to not be the way to go. And with syndicalism on the rise in a lot of places around the world, yeah, anything resembling any kind of monarchy is probably not going to go too well.
McCormick and his,
and of course, they're not going to want, you know, the syndicalist movement in Britain, after just removing a monarchy from Britain, they're not going to want to allow another one to be established in Scotland and have their own independence, you know, etc., etc. Just going to cause more problems in the future.
Allies,
they're going to want to keep a united, you know, country.
Oswald Mosley had campaigned for the Unionist side and had won over many supporters in the process. He capitalized on the controversial referendum to win himself a seat in the provincial parliament via a by-election. The PRP had its first MP. Witnessing the political violence in Scotland, Mosley realised the violence could be propagandised. To this end, he established the Popular Revolutionary Guards, or simply the Black Shirts. He ordered his new Black Shirts to partake in the Scottish violence. On the world stage, Britain had formally joined the Third International, a military alliance with the Commune of France and the Socialist Republic of Italy. The alliance advocated for world syndicalism.
It's interesting too that Mussolini, you know, in this timeline seems, you know, became a syndicalism and had joined with the French, it seems.
In 1929, the members conducted joint naval and military exercises. This was the first time Britain could demonstrate its new British supercarrier, the Rebecca. The British had made their return to naval warfare and were building a navy capable of taking on the Kaiserreich Marine. This new navy was self-governing and largely self-financing, influencing its own shipbuilding and controlling the naval defence of Britain. By the late 1930s, the Republican Navy was one of the largest and strongest navies in the world, and the sole European power that could challenge Germany. On land, the Republican Army was considered to have a secondary role to the Navy. The main
it would make sense.
Was a small but well-trained army. Despite its size, the manpower pool of Britain was great, and a large army could be raised on short notice. General Tom Wintringham would oversee the reorganization of local militias into the Home Guard reserves.
I mean, it would make sense that, right, like, the British Navy would probably be the main naval force for this new syndicalist alliance, and the French and Italian armies would probably make up the bulk of the ground forces, the infantry, etc.
A volunteer army charged with delaying any foreign invaders.
Right.
Throughout 1929, Mosley would continue to remain on the periphery of British politics, though the PRP would begin to slowly build up a following of authoritarian-minded intelligentsia and disgruntled workers and the unemployed. The Black Shirts began to grow rapidly, and Mosley personally oversaw the creation of the elite I Squad as his personal bodyguard. His wife Cynthia would create the female wing of the Black Shirts, humorously called the Black Skirts. They would quickly begin to attract many female supporters, owing to its progressive veneer and the lack of opportunities for women elsewhere in politics. Despite this, the established parties claimed that these women were simply seduced by Mosley's womanizing nature.
Hmm.
The following year, in 1930, Deputy Chairman John Wheatley suffered a heart attack, leaving him bedridden. A search for his successor began. A massive debate started in the Federal Congress. Wheatley put forward the experienced Archibald Fenner Brockway as his desired replacement. However, Wheatley was asked to retract his proposal, as many believed Brockway would align himself with the moderates of the Independent Labour Party. Wheatley's close friend John Beckett convinced him on his deathbed to support Oswald Mosley as his successor. To the surprise of all, Oswald Mosley was inaugurated as the new deputy chairman of the Federal Congress following Wheatley's death.
Interesting.
Mosley vowed publicly to once and for all root out the reactionary fifth column that sought to see the monarchy restored and the post-revolution order overthrown.
So yeah, this is where things seems to start taking a turn towards the more radical side of stuff, with Mosley coming into power. He's already kind of established his own, private guard, private army of both men and women, and probably have set them up in certain positions of power. And yeah, now that he's going to be, elected as replacement, it's gonna, yeah.
Fenner Brockway would pen an open letter denouncing Mosley's appointment to the head of the CIC. Granting a young man with overweening pride and no accountability the power to decide the future of the Union is inherently destructive. Britain may soon find itself in a tin pot dictatorship unless action is immediately taken. At first, Mosley made no major moves, though as the young man would assert his new powers, cracks would grow with Chairman Cook. Mosley would begin to arrest many liberals, which he defended as rooting out a monarchist conspiracy. Major liberals were imprisoned and swiftly tried and convicted, confessing to having been in contact with the Royalists. Mosley presented taped and written confessions to the Federal Congress. He would warn that there are traitors among us. With his rise to prominence, the Popular Revolution Party rode this tide, making a meteoric rise from the wilderness, with its membership rapidly increasing.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people at the time, like the general public, probably would be in favor for all the stuff that he's doing. Being that he's doing it under the guise of removing supporters for the old guard, the people who are in favor of returning the Royalists back, giving them control, etc.
Despite the arrests, Cook did his best to rein in Mosley. By early 1931, Chairman Cook would announce he was stepping down due to his ongoing battle with cancer, and he nominated Thomas Mann as his natural successor. Mann was a major figure in the British Union and had aligned with Mosley against criticism from Brockway. Mann believed Mosley's promotion of orthodox syndicalism was the correct British way of life.
That's just going to launch things even further.
In the first regularly held elections,
instead of having basically that's like the last wall of opposition or any kind of reins that was holding him back from going full blown, radical, has now gone away, and he's going to be given kind of like a full authority to do whatever he wants.
The Labour Party, now headed by Mann, and its coalition party of Mosley's Popular Revolution Party, won in a landslide. As was expected, Mann reappointed Mosley as deputy chairman and head of the CIC, and formed a mixed cabinet of Labour and PRP notables. Mann allowed the CIC to drift slowly from TUC oversight and become solely responsible to the Executive Committee. Following the election, Mann publicly declared that the true work for a syndicalist Britain begins today, and he would go on to say, all liberals must fully embrace the fruits of socialism. In private, he expressed, "A liberal is but a soft Tory." The press, already under moderate censorship, was gradually brought under the control of the Ministry of Information. A series of new decrees were passed strengthening the TUC's emergency powers. Stafford Cripps, in his diary, would reveal that Clement Attlee remarked, "The Bullring Court will, should we carry on with tolerating Mosleyism, become the only court in currency." The Man-Mosley coalition would continue the Union's efforts to expand and modernize, focusing on industrialization and gaining self-sufficiency. Further resources were poured into expanding the military and naval capabilities.
Especially during that time, right? Like, again, United States is going through an economic crisis. I think, even Black Monday had probably happened at this point. So a lot of countries in Europe are going through economic crisis. It's a time to make sure that you're self-reliant, trying to break away from gasoline related things, making sure that the populace is able to grow and maintain their own food sources, et cetera, et cetera. It's smart. And then making sure to shift yourself to self-reliance on industrialism, rebuilding and strengthening your navy so you can assert yourself, and or at the very least, defend from any kind of invasion. So it seems like they have reestablished themselves pretty quickly, honestly.
In June 1932, Herbert Samuel and Philip Snowden, the leaders of the Liberal and Independent Labour parties, planned to merge to create a...
What I think it said, it was 1926, I think, either earlier in this video. I may be just making a number up, but I thought it was like 1926 or 27, I thought, and they said in this video earlier, when the royal family essentially was exiled and the syndicalist movement kind of took over, and now they're in 1932 and they've kind of reestablished themselves. So that's what, 6 years, something like that.
A super organization that would be able to form a majority in the provincial parliament and hold the TUC to ransom. In response, Mann ordered the parliament to be prorogued and passed several new laws de facto outlawing opposition parties. Mann himself championed the new laws and declared, "The Union of Britain is a nation founded on and committed to syndicalism."
They're going hardcore into syndicalism,
not in need of fractious ideological squabbling when the way forward is clear. Chairman Cook's greatest fault was his inability to end parliamentarianism. Let us fulfill his dream once and for all. For Mosley, these steps did not go far enough. He proposed to Mann to permanently disband the provincial parliament and cancel all future elections.
Wow.
He justified parliamentarianism was a sin of the reactionary regimes of yesteryear.
Talk about getting into dictatorship.
The cabinet supported the proposal and pressured the chairman to agree. Consulting with Clement Attlee, Mann proceeded with plans to dissolve the provincial parliament, but instead chose to create a new chamber of Congress, albeit one much less powerful than the provincial parliament, the Councilist Assembly. Mosley felt betrayed by the choice, and a rift developed between him and the chairman. The TUC soon found itself developing distinctive political cliques. Mosley and his tight-knit group of followers began to push more and more of his Birmingham proposals, which stressed the need for total commitment to socialism and the maximum effort for the revolution, becoming known as the Maximalists, effectively made up of the old Popular Revolution Party. As Britain entered the mid-1930s, the Mann-Mosley divide had gotten progressively worse, and factionalism had divided the TUC. This political uncertainty would be the focus of the upcoming 1936 election.
A fight lies before us, a fight for action, for vigor, for vitality and manhood in government.
The future of the Union would be decided by either Mann or Mosley.
Who do you think you are
Interesting.
kidding, Mr. Mosley?
Interesting. Well, there you have it. That was Rise of Oswald Mosley documentary in the Kaiserreich universe here by JD Media. Links will be down below in the description to the original video without my commentary reaction into JD Media's channel. So yeah, a little bit more in-depth information, I guess, on what happened in the years after syndicalism had taken over, you know, on the British, you know, in the British Empire, essentially, and the consequences of that. They definitely, it's interesting as, like, obviously on the one hand, they became very self-reliant, with population, a lot of the population moving back to the countryside, you know, getting back into, I guess what you could say, grassroots movements, if you want to call that, getting back into farming, making sure they were self-reliant, you know, by doing that, as far as the foodstuffs, and then more than likely, I would assume any kind of extra foodstuffs would go into some kind of, you know, government storage or whatever. But it empowered the people, and you know, got a lot of people out of poverty. Them, you know, looking for alternatives to not rely on petrol and gasoline. Quickly rebuilding their navy. The interesting thing I thought about that was the fact that their navy is almost kind of independent from the government and kind of running itself, but being able to reform a powerful navy quickly obviously is very important, especially for an island, you know, nation like that, and with Germany, you know, relatively close by across the sea. They need to be able to assert their power, and like I said, with the triple alliance they have with them, France and Germany, it only makes sense that they would probably be the naval focus power, and France and Germany kind of being more of the ground focused power with, you know, infantry, tanks, and things of that kind of nature, with the British ground forces kind of being a secondary thing. But yeah, I mean, from the Kaiserreich video we got him before, you know, it talked about totalism. Maybe this is, like I said, potentially another kind of alternate thing that could happen in the Kaiserreich universe, because, like I said, they got into totalism, which was a much more radical version of syndicalism, and it was very much, on the Kaiserreich cinema video, sounded very close to, you know, the German SS forming, and a lot of liberals and people of I guess that were accused of being loyal or royalist sympathizers were just up and disappearing, and they got into that some in this video too, with Mosley and his factions. So I would kind of have to, I guess, go back and rewatch some of that and see if that's part of this, if it was the same person or if it was something different. But fascinating nonetheless. Fascinating nonetheless. I would want, one of the things that I would be interested in seeing is the royal family side of things, what they're up to in Canada and how they're trying to, you know, rebuild. You know, because them being exiled, they promised that they were going to return with Canadian forces and retake the continent and the country from themselves. And, you know, so I'm sure that's something that is probably what is going to be leading up to what would be World War II in this universe, with, again, you know, the Entente still kind of being a thing, Canada, I think Australia, big chunks of Africa, and I think maybe in parts of South America were allied in the Entente against, you know, the Weltkrieg and then the Syndicalists. Those seem to be kind of like the major factions going on at the time leading into World War II, from what I know so far. So it'd be interesting. I would love to hear more about that. So if anyone has any other content creators out there who are doing more videos in this universe, in this alternate history timeline, I would love to, you know, watch some videos from them on these different subjects, because I love this stuff. I love history, and I just find this stuff kind of fascinating. So but yeah, thanks for watching, guys. If you want to join us when we do these reactions live, there's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I offer. So if yeah, you want to take your support to the next level, if you want to join us when we do these reactions live and join our discussions that we have before, during, and after the videos, you know, we'd love to have you guys come in here and hang out with us. So check that out if you'd like to take your support to the next level. But thanks for watching. Appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and a subs. It helps me and the channel grow. We'll see you guys in the next one. Hope you're having yourselves a wonderful day.